On this episode, the Art of Culinary Spaces takes us to the Buttered Biscuit, where an elevated design sets the stage for expansion of this full-service breakfast concept. By reimagining both the front and back of the house, Starr Design created a flexible prototype that enhances operational efficiency while delivering a warm, inviting customer experience. Join me in welcoming FCSI member Steve Starr as we explore how thoughtful system design and strategic equipment choices are driving this concept's success beyond its Northwest Arkansas roots. Hi, we're here today to talk about the Buttered Biscuit in Little Rock, Arkansas. Steve, thanks for joining the show with me today. For season 3, we're starting every episode with the same question so everybody can kind of learn where leads come from for all you consultants. And so the first question is, how did this project come about for you in Starr Design?
Well, this was a really interesting story because I do a good bit of speaking at a lot of different events, but usually don't get much business out of them. And this was the exception to the rule. And we were about every other year we help out Benny Keith, the food purveyor. In the Central South region, and they do a conference, and for all of their clients, I was speaking about kitchen efficiencies and in primarily restaurants. And Sam Russell was there, and we started talking afterwards, and it took about 8, 9 months before he was ready to pull the trigger. And once he did, we were kind of off to the races and have a great, just wonderful collaborative relationship. He's been one of my favorite clients to work with. And, right now the proof is in the pudding. So,
Well, to start with then, from what was the project's timeline when you first got it? I always like to hear in the beginning what it was supposed to be and then what it ends up being, because a lot of times they're not usually one and the same. So what was the timeline and kind of the preliminary budget at the beginning of the program?
well, it was a series of projects. So the Russells came to us, Sam and Anna Russell, to help create a set of design standards, a prototype, if you will, that would create a much more efficient and much more brand forward presentation of their phenomenal menu. And then we would use that to launch a rollout program to go outside of their home market of Northwest Arkansas. So they had 4 locations in Northwest Arkansas, Fayetteville, Bentonville, that area. And each one operated a little differently, very, very different setups, very different equipment, and the look and feel and the way they were presenting their brand in each one was very different. So for them, this was the original project was to help create something that they could use as the basis for entering new geographic markets. And that then turned into the first project, which was the location at the Promenade at Chenal in Little Rock, which is about 3 hours outside of Northwest Arkansas. And then the second location in a neighborhood called the Heights, also in Little Rock. And now we're really actively looking at the Tulsa, Oklahoma market and the Kansas City market.
Very cool. Now you began to the very first part of this project I read in the article was you began with a segmentation study. For those that aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit about what that means to you and what that means for the client? And then how did that study influence the design and operational you came up with for the new moving forward models?
So I think it's a great question. And it's interesting because very few people ask me about it. And I think it's super important. It's, I'm always amazed at how many operators don't really know truly who their core customer is. So, what we try to do is really understand who their core customer is currently, and then comparing that data with, and we use the model from Experian, the credit card company. It's called Experian Mosaics. We use that model as our uh, the basis for that study, and we then compare that with restaurant performance, and we look at the segmentations for the best performing, the middle performing, and the worst performing, and we start to look for some of the trends through that. And from that, we create a target guest personas. And that helps with a lot of things. It helps with having the restaurateur select sites with a higher level of confidence because there's actually data behind it, not just uh, gut reaction or feel. And also, from a design standpoint, we start to use that data to really focus the brand so that all of the messaging from the facilities, even from the parking lot all the way through, reinforce what will attract and what will retain, what's really relevant to that type of audience. So it just helps to focus things. You know, the worst thing we hear is, oh, yeah, everybody's our customer, or everybody, we want everybody. And that we have found over the years is the kiss of death. So you can't be all things to all people. If the more targeted you are, the better. And it's interesting because you have the bullseye on the target, and that doesn't exclude other people. You end up getting those outer rings as well, but there's so much higher chance of success being targeted. And that segmentation study allows us to use data to find out who that target, that bullseye on the target is.
What you talked about that, they moved in from Central to now Little Rock, and now they're looking at Tulsa and Kansas City. What's inspired the Butter Biscuit team to expand beyond the Northwest Arkansas area? Why all of a sudden have they decided now's the time to start looking to branch out?
That's a great question. I'm going to answer it in two different ways. So give me a little bit of latitude here. The the restaurant for the Russells is actually a Trojan horse. They love the restaurant business, but not necessarily for the restaurant business itself. They love it because they believe that the restaurant business, especially their restaurants, give people an opportunity for growth. No matter what background they come from, what educational, socioeconomic backgrounds they come from, it's really a unique opportunity to grow and create a career. That truly is Sam and Anna Russell's mission behind the buttered biscuit. More so, and they're using breakfast and lunch as the vehicle to, you know, in to live that mission. The so that's one answer. So it's really to provide more opportunities for more people to continue this mission. And a lot of clients over the years have talked about these lofty things. I can tell you with 100% confidence that the Russells and the buttered biscuit, they live this. This is not just talk to them, that they walk the walk. And it's really inspiring for us to be a part of that. The other side of it, they're also business people. And there's Northwest Arkansas is a great emerging market, but it's finite. It's limited right now. So really to expand and grow, they had to go outside their market and look at other markets and use that as a vehicle to continue to self-fund the concept and its growth. And they've had some great successes in Northwest Arkansas, but we really used the new design and the new locations in Little Rock to kind of turbocharge the concept.
Perfect segue into my next question too then is why did you feel it was so important to go beyond just updating the aesthetics and such of what they already had and convince them to invest into a complete full concept redesign moving forward? And then what with the new location being the one that's going to be the future, if you will, at the Promenade, what this full concept redesign, what were the goals you had in mind to go into the first one? Knowing that you had to design something for Promenade and for the area it's in, but also you were designing something now that was going to be replicated no matter where it went. So, kind of walk me through why you decided to go through a full redesign and kind of what were some of those design goals you had in mind for it?
So the overall goals were consistency from unit to unit and create in order to create that consistency, we had to first develop a set of systems, operational systems that would allow for that consistency. And the existing locations they had really weren't set up in a way that would allow for those systems. So a full overhaul was really required. Um, and it it also, given the state of the industry, labor was critical. You know, allowing the concept to, and especially a breakfast concept, the kitchen had to or has to be able to handle weekend peak hours where it's super high volume, and then also flex down and be efficient during off peak, say a Tuesday morning or Tuesday at lunch where you're really only going to have two people in the back, and they've got to be able to operate everything efficiently. So those were our overall goals, was creating operational and consistency, and two, allowing for the labor flexibility.
I did read in the article too that you did have them, you convinced them to do one major change that they were doing in previous models, and that was you move from French omelet, which is time consuming, to scrambles. Is that what you just talked about, is that one of the reasons?
That actually wasn't a hard that wasn't a hard thing to convince them. It was there was no arm twisting involved there. That was actually an easy thing. I think they were at least halfway there already. Um, just because, again, a French omelet is a difficult thing to pull off consistently with without highly skilled labor. A lot of people don't realize that how hard it is to do that. The other issue was that the way they were doing it, it took up two major pieces of equipment. They were using omelet pans on the uh, saute burners, and but all the fillings were being cooked to order on the flat top. So you were kind of crossing over from station to station. So one of the biggest things operationally that we did was develop a system um, for the scrambles to be made all on the saute burners. And we did a lot of testing, which is something I truly wholeheartedly believe in. Um, I can come up with amazing ideas and amazing processes. Don't believe any of them. Test them first, and we'll see what really works. And one of the things that we changed with the scrambles was that in one pan we would start the fillings up on. We actually used a step up burner range, and which it's funny because almost everyone I talk to says, it's a waste. You don't need anything like that. But for this, it actually worked perfectly because we would start the scramble on the step up, on the back burners on higher heat, get the fillings all cooked down, and then bring it to the lower burners, which were on much lower heat, and add the eggs and scramble it in. And that process allowed it to be significantly more efficient. It was all done on one piece of equipment in one pan.
Now, I love the idea of testing, and you, and I love hearing stories about this where consultants do this. You also leaned in on the manufacturer of the equipment and their culinary team. So tell us a little bit about what it was like working with the manufacturer's culinary team, because I don't know if a lot of restaurateurs and some of our audience even realize that most, if not every one of the manufacturers of food of kitchen equipment you see has their own culinary team on site in their own headquarters. That's all they do is play and figure out how to do weird things with the equipment.
And in fact, most of the big rep groups for the manufacturers have local culinary experts as well. So we were able to leverage both our reps here in the Charlotte area, as well as we really relied heavily on Middleby and their South Bend and their Crown Steam Group, um, and they were phenomenal. And they have something that uh, is a little bit unique in the industry. They have the Middleby Innovation Kitchen that if any of our members haven't been there, go. It's amazing. And Middleby typically will take care of it for you, but it's the most amazing culinary playground I've ever seen. And they've got a just phenomenal culinary team. Chef Jason is a master chef, and he introduced us to a self-stirring round tilt skillet called the Fire X. It's got a terrible name, the Fire X Cucci Mix, out of Italy, but it's an amazing piece of equipment that allowed us to essentially automate the our gravy, jams and jellies, and a few other items. But the big things were the gravy and the jams and jellies, which are it's incredibly easy to burn, and this allowed them to be automated. Using the Fire X made it almost impossible to burn, and it also allowed us to stretch out our prep labor because it's automated. It You don't have to sit and stir the roux the entire time. It does it for you, so you can go cut veggies or do something else while you're making gravy. And it's not an inexpensive piece of equipment, but it absolutely had a return on investment because, again, if you burn a big stock pot of sausage gravy, you not only lost the product and have to start over, but you've also lost, a good bit of time. So this really helped create a again that idea of consistency from unit to unit, from day to day, from prep cook to prep cook, and Chef Jason was phenomenal, um, in helping us to take Sam and Anna's recipes and optimize them for the piece of equipment. Same thing with um, Chef Jim in the Invoke um, combi oven. And we really optimized all of the recipes, from simply cooking bacon to almost steaming fresh corned beef, and to get higher yields, and uh, and most importantly to create just amazing biscuits.
Which obviously is the most important.
Most important thing, that's the star. And the biscuits now are incredibly consistent. They're fantastic. And the second thing that's almost on every plate, other than the biscuit, is the breakfast potatoes. And he really helped us create a system where we could optimize, cook quickly the potatoes in the combi oven, which was these are huge wins. They don't sound very big, but in the grand scheme of things, on a multi-unit scenario, you're talking about a lot of money in labor, a lot of money in product.
And efficiency, right?
Yeah, so these efficiencies made an enormous difference.
Well, let's come from back of the house to the front of the house because you did some things here that I also like to hear a little bit more about in the front of the house features. So you brought in an expo window, warming shelf. You also switched to zone seating. Tell us, kind of quickly, like how did that improve service speed and flexibility, especially with those, highs and lows of weekends versus weekdays?
Yeah, so one of the keys to this was creating multiple zones within a 3,500 square foot restaurant so that it was easy to, during the week, especially during the week, lunchtime is the slowest time. The restaurant doesn't feel empty. It We just essentially close off one of the zones, and we really used the different seating types, different booth layouts and banquettes and other uh, ceiling focal elements and floor elements to define those areas without actually creating walls and creating different segmented dining rooms.
So you've got like rooms within the restaurant, but it doesn't feel like really a room. So, but when you close it off, you don't feel like you're missing out on the rest of it because it doesn't look the same.
Exactly.
Now, you also talked about using color and lighting to create the atmosphere as well. So tell us how you created and what was the goal with using the lighting to create some kind of atmosphere for there.
So, one of the keys that we always try to do is clearly communicate and orchestrate, choreograph, if you will, the guest journey. And the way we do that is by creating a series of visual focal elements, both focal elements that will draw the customer in physically, where they actually move from one area to another, but also when they're sitting down eating, we're using the focal elements to draw their attention and keep their attention or move their attention from one item to the other to reinforce those key brand messages. One of the things that a lot of food service operators don't realize or don't fully realize is that their facility is their number one, the most expensive asset. So from that asset, they really need to get the most out of it as they possibly can. And it's a phenomenal backdrop for communicating their brand and those key messages to their target audience. And all it really takes is a lot of thought and intentionality to first pare things down to the essence of what you can't have 27 key brand messages, but let's say there's 3 or 4. How do you clearly communicate those to the guest so that subliminally they understand what you're trying to convey to them? So you talked about the expo kitchen. You talked about I think you mentioned the breakfast bar that fronts the expo kitchen. Um, that was the key brand message, one of their core elements to the buttered biscuit is that this is a 99.9% of the food is scratch made, made to order. They're not holding things. They're not using, frozen items that are it's handcrafted, scratch made, and we really wanted to celebrate that. So the best seats in the house to celebrate that are actually the breakfast bar because you look right into the pass-through window. And in this case, we did a simple thing. We just lowered the the sill of the pass-through window, lowered the bottom shelf so that the fresh ingredients in the refrigerated units are on display, and even more importantly, you see the cook's hands working, and it just becomes a little bit of food theater that reinforces that message that this is truly scratch-made food, done by hand, made to order.
You talked about you're doing the next one in the Heights and then moving on to do uh, Kansas City and Tulsa. What as you always go when you start a redesign and start a new concept, not a new concept, but a new design. What have you learned from this prototype that's influencing you on the next one and the one after that potentially? That is there anything you did that you're like, okay, that worked great. We have to do that again, or is there anything you do also on the flip side? Is there anything that maybe you're like, we could make this a little bit more efficient, or we could do this a little more differently than we did in the past?
We simplified some of the storage areas and allowed for a little bit more dry storage. We emphasized the uh, to-go pickup area a little bit more, and we want to continue to do that because we see that um, I don't know if third-party delivery or there's a whole lot of a huge market in the to-go breakfast market without a drive-through, but there is an enormous opportunity and a growing opportunity in catering. So to have a place for all of that to actually happen and again, to make it really easy for the guest to understand, oh, I'm coming in to pick up my catering order. This is where I go. So we've made some tweaks to make that a little bit more understandable and a little bit better. We've made the breakfast bar, the actual bar part of it, the mimosas, Bloody Marys, and things like that, a little bit more efficient. And the other big thing is just we went from their in Northwest Arkansas, their highest grossing restaurant was in the 1.8 million range to the Promenade in Little Rock which is on track right now to do about 2.6 million. So there's an enormous change, and so we've had to adjust a few things to handle that higher volume.
Well, Steve, that's all the questions I've got for you today. But before I let you go, tell us a little bit more how people can find a little bit more information about you and Starr Design.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our website is probably the best way to find us. It's www.starrdesignteam.com, Starr with 2 R's. And we're a little bit of a unique animal, especially in the world of food service consulting, because so many of our colleagues focus on the contract and institutional food service, and we're really we do a little bit of that, but we really focus on emerging restaurant brands. So it's a little niche that's worked out well so far.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Art of Culinary Spaces. We hope this conversation has sparked your creativity and inspired new ideas within the world of food service design and planning. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of our future podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode when we explore another groundbreaking project and exceptional design from FCSI members that are transforming the culinary landscape.